The focus of this video is to summarize the events of digestion for each of your major organic nutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. And we're going to examine how they are broken down at the different levels of your GI tract or alimentary canal, starting with the mouth, moving on to the stomach, and finally ending at the small intestine, which is also their site of absorption. So before we begin, let's go ahead and identify the end products of absorption. So what do each of these different groups need to be broken down into in order to be able to be absorbed? And so carbohydrates have to be broken down into the monosaccharides. And so monosaccharides are the simple sugars. And we have three different types. We have glucose, fructose, as well as galactose. So these are the end products for carbohydrates in order to be absorbed at the level of the small intestine epithelium. Next up, let's look at proteins. So proteins, these have to be broken down into, again, their monomer. And so if you remember from early chapters in A&P, the monomers of proteins are your free amino acids. So this is the end goal of protein digestion. And then finally, our lipids, these have to be broken down into fatty acids as well as monoglycerides. So let's go ahead and talk about each of those different groups, and we'll start with carbohydrates. At the level of the mouth, we do have an enzyme that is called salivary amylase. And this is where chemical digestion of carbohydrates is going to occur. And so salivary amylase can break down starch into maltose, a disaccharide, but maltose has to be further broken into glucose, and this occurs later on throughout the alimentary tract. And starch can also be broken down by salivary amylase into oligosaccharides. Just longer chains than just a disaccharide, but definitely smaller than a starch chain. Next up, as we arrive to the stomach, there are no enzymes in the stomach that are dedicated to carbohydrate digestion. So the next location in which carbohydrates will be digested is the small intestine. And the small intestine, as you know, first serves as a site for pancreatic digestive enzymes. And so one of the pancreatic digestive enzymes that will act on carbohydrates is what we call pancreatic amylase. Now, in addition to pancreatic enzymes, we also have brush border enzymes that are located at the surface of your small intestinal wall. And so these enzymes include sucrase, which will act on sucrose, and this sucrose is a disaccharide. We also have lactase, which will act on lactose. So sucrase is going to break down sucrose into glucose and fructose, and lactase is going to break down lactose into glucose and galactose. And we also have the maltase enzyme, which will break down maltose into 2-glucose monosaccharides. Now let's move on. So let's discuss proteins next. First off, in the mouth, there are no enzymes dedicated for protein digestion, so we only have mechanical digestion due to mastication and mastication and the activity of your tongue and teeth combined. But the first site in which proteins are going to be digested chemically is the stomach, and this is due to the enzyme pepsin. So pepsin released in the stomach and is going to break down proteins into just smaller peptides. But peptides, as you know, are chains of amino acids, so they do need to be broken down further, and this will occur in the small intestine. And again, we have several pancreatic enzymes that are going to be released in the small intestine. And these are going to be trypsin, chymotrypsin, as well as carboxypeptidase. And so, in addition to these pancreatic enzymes, we also have some brush border enzymes. So again, at the surface of the small intestine. And these are going to be dipeptidase, which breaks down dipeptides, as well as aminopeptidase. So at the end of this small intestine phase, now we have our proteins in the amino acid state. And so here, both the products from carbohydrate digestion and protein digestion are going to be absorbed by the small intestine and into your blood capillaries. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at lipids. So lipids are going to be broken down, and product is going to be fatty acids and monoglycerides. And let's start with the mouth. So inside the mouth, we do have a lingual lipase that is going to start chemical digestion of lipids in the mouth. At the level of the stomach, we also have what we call gastric lipase. And then finally, in the intestine, we also have a pancreatic enzyme that we call pancreatic lipase. Also, do not forget that we also have bile that is released into the small intestine, duodenum, so the first segment of your small intestine. And this bile functions to emulsify lipids, or just break them down into smaller globules in order to be more accessible for those enzymes to be broken down. And so bile is going to take part in emulsifying lipids. Not so much a chemical digestion, more of a mechanical digestion, but it's important to note that it does take part in the digestion of lipids into their end products, fatty acids and monoglycerides. And so here, it's an important distinction to make between carbs, proteins, and lipids, because lipids are not absorbed into your blood capillary. Instead, they are absorbed into the lacteal. So as part of the lymphatic system, very, very small vessels of the lymphatic system that we refer to as lacteals. Okay, and so this is a summary of these three major organic nutrients and how they are broken down into their monomer or their small subunits in order to allow for easy absorption.